You'll notice I never have a script, and it's not because I'm lazy. I think having a script is actually worse, because if I had a script tonight, you would have known that I didn't create it this afternoon because I was on the bus with you, and you would have known I didn't create it yesterday. So I would have created it sometime in the past, and I find a lot of speakers reuse their scripts over and over again. That's not to say we have sign bites that we use or quotes that we use, like the most valuable piece of real estate is the 6 inches, go take an inch to it in your right ear and left ear. But I like to have it just free-flowing, because if we start off on mindset and there are questions or comments, or I can tell by the expressions on your faces that have fallen asleep that you don't want to hear about that, then we can change the topic. Whereas if I had a script, I would be forced, by mere dint of the fact that it is a script, to read from that. So I want this to be free-flow. And in that context of mindset, I don't even know if you guys are aware of this, but I run a 2-day event called The Psychology of Creating Wealth. And it's not a pitch for it. I don't have any on the calendar. I'm sort of toning down what I do, because my real joy is in finding a lump of $30 million. That's a lot of $100 bills stacked up in a car park. Did you see it in the car park today? It was a massive car park. There was a pile of $30 million. And the only thing we had to do to take all our bags, because it wouldn't fit in one bag, and pick up that $30 million, is make a few phone calls to find a tenant. That to me is exciting. Once you know that that's possible, your level of excitement goes up. But let me assure you of one thing. Once you participate in doing a deal like that, your whole world will change. Your outlook on life will change. Your outlook on money will change. Your outlook on a new car will change. And I'm not a car buff. I have a beautiful luxury, ultra luxury Lexus, and it's 18 years old, and it doesn't really bother me. And I've got cars in other places, so it doesn't matter. But my point is, it's all mindset. I run this whole weekend event on mindset, because what happened with me is I was teaching real estate for about 15 years, and I decided to make a study. I wanted to know how many of my students, and I was thinking of some nominal figures, how many became, say, a millionaire within 18 months. So I crafted this beautiful questionnaire. It was 7 pages long, so that they wouldn't just feel they were being hit up to let me know what their net worth was. But it was useful information for us to get, and we sent it out, I think at the time, to 7,000 people. And this was sort of on the cusp when the internet was becoming great. So the questionnaire was sent out with 7,000 questionnaires in an envelope, stamped and sent out. And I was sitting quite happy, waiting for the results to come back in. And when they did come in, I was devastated, because it was fewer than 4%. Fewer than 4% of my students became a millionaire within 18 months. And to me, that wasn't even statistically significant. By which I mean that if you take 1,000 people at random, 4% are going to become millionaires through any of different, they go to Vegas and strike gold, or they find a paper bag on the street and there's $1 million in it, or they marry into wealth, or they divorce into wealth, or whatever. And, there are so many ways of that. 4% was just, that wasn't even, I didn't contribute to that. So I stopped teaching, and I vowed never to teach again until I'd cracked that nut. And I put full time of my effort into it. I read over 200 books on the topics. Many of them you've heard of, you've probably read The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz, Napoleon Hill. I've read that 6 or 8 times. All those books. Psycho-Cybernetics, have you heard of that? By Maxwell Maltz. He was a plastic surgeon. And he would take people who were congenitally disfigured with the most ugly faces you can imagine. Well, I don't need to screw mine up, but anyway, the most ugly faces. And then he would craft these beautiful faces out of them. But he noticed that after he turned this ugliness into beauty, they still felt horrible. They still felt ugly. So he realized it was more than their physical looks, that they could see in the mirror, and other people would tell them, you look magnificent. They still felt ugly. And so I read over 200 books on that, and I interviewed a lot of people. I read biographies, autobiographies, and I'm blessed, as you've probably figured out. I luck out. I meet people. I think I told you today about Paul Simon and how A-Rod came to me, and all these people. Trump hunted me down. I'm not political. I don't like what he did, some of the things, but he did hunt me down, and he ended up writing the foreword to one of my books. And, Kiyosaki came to me and said, let's teach together. Tony Robbins asked me to teach from, not the other way. So I get to meet all these people, and I interviewed all of them. And after 11 months of intense research, I realized what the missing formula was in my teachings that resulted in only 4% of my students becoming millionaires. And it had nothing to do with my accent. And for the record, I don't even have an accent. Most of you do, all except Shannon, and it's called an American accent. And the whole world would agree with me, except for people in this country. No, it's all relative. It's all perspective. It wasn't the rate of speech, because do you know that the human brain is capable of accepting information about 7 times the rate of normal human speech? You can follow it perfectly well. And the only reason we don't do it is because it's not very polite to speak that fast, but would actually convey a lot more information if we managed to speak that fast. When I listen to audios, I often speed it up. You can do 2 times to 3 times because the brain can absorb it. That's why you can speed read as well, right? And did you know that speed readers actually absorb more of what they read than people who pedantically read every word? Because when you read every word of a sentence, then by the time you get halfway through, you've forgotten what the beginning was all about, and you start all over again. So it's just one of these things. So I realized it had nothing to do with speed. It had nothing to do with the content of my information, or the sequencing of it, or the manner of delivery, or whether or not I told jokes with it or not. It had everything to do with the subconscious mind of the student. Because whether we like it or not, we've got tapes. I guess tapes is an old concept now. We've got slabs of silicon chippery in there that record sound bites that we hear over and over again. So have any of you, as a kid, said something like, hey, Mum or Dad, I want a bicycle? And they said, well, what do you think, kid, that money grows on trees? And we've all heard this when you have a big audience, and money grows on, and they all say trees. And it's meant as money doesn't come that easily. But what they're really saying is money's hard to come by. You can't expect to get it. Well, who do you think you are asking for a bicycle? You got a go-kart last year, and it's too much. We're not that rich. And how many of us haven't heard that money can't buy you happiness? And my response to this is, oh, money can't buy you happiness, but it sure as anything buys the next best thing. No, that's a joke. But anyway, or money can't buy you happiness, but I'd rather cry in a Rolls Royce than in a Mini. But this notion, by inference, when you have money, you won't be happy. Money is the root of all evil. And then often people say, but Dolf, in the Bible, the real saying is, for the love of money is the root of all evil. And there's a big difference, and you should know it. And I may know it, but your subconscious mind doesn't. It hears money and evil in the same sentence. And slowly but surely, the more we hear this, we associate money with evil. So money will result in us not being happy. Money is evil. Then we say it is easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. Do you know what the eye of the needle is, by the way? I've been there. It's the eastern entrance to Jerusalem. And it was so low that camels had to get down on their knees as a sign of respect. Why, I don't know, but that's sort of the origin of it. So easier to get a camel through the east entrance to Jerusalem than for a rich man to get into heaven. In other words, and forgive me for putting it this bluntly, but if you're rich, you're condemned to hell. Kind of stark, isn't it? Think of what you were told as a kid. Might have been along those lines. Over and over again. And it might be one of the ones I said, money can't buy you happiness. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money's the root of all evil. It is easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. How about it's better to give than to receive? In other words, having money is bad. You should get rid of it because that's good. Receiving it is bad. Can you see how these all build on each other? And then to top it off, we have the saying, we say, they're so rich, they're filthy rich. They're so rich, they're stinking rich. We associate being rich with filth and stench. We don't say they're cleanly rich or whatever the right adjective, they're clean rich, or they're delightfully rich, or they're happily rich, or they're sexily rich. No, we say they're filthy rich. So what happens in the US and every Western nation is when you win the lottery, and when I was a kid, we used to have lotteries. I remember in Australia, you put 20 cents to buy a lottery ticket, and you might win $20,000. And back then, 20,000 seemed like $1 million, right? What do you win now when you win the lottery? What numbers have you heard people winning?
100 million.
100 million, right? 4 people just recently won a 600 million jackpot. So it's hundreds of millions. And do you know that within 5 years of winning the lottery, 80% of winners are back to where they were before they won. 80% squander their money within 5 years.
Or worse off.
Or worse off, yeah. And you
debt and loans.
Right. Now, why is that? Because you can bet your bottom dollar that any one of those winners, when you said to them, hey, you've just got 100 million, do you think you're going to be broke in 5 years? They said, no, I've got 100 million. I'm going to quit my job. But I won't need a job. It would take me 3 centuries to earn the 100 million. Well, even more, with a job than having the 100 million. So they would all deny they're going to lose it. Why do they lose it? They've already been trained about the necessity for poverty and how they're not going to be happy. So they led a perfectly normal, happy life. They weren't very rich, but they got by they scraped by. And suddenly they've got 100 million. And in the first week, they're ecstatic. I'm going to tell my boss where to shove it. He's never been good to me. And I'm going to buy a new car. And I'm going to buy my parents a new home. They'll be so happy. And they are, and your boss won't like it, and you'll have a new car. But then as the weeks roll by, you think, man, this hasn't made me happy. In fact, all my cousins have come to me asking not just for a loan, but for money. That's kind of sucky. And I'm probably going to become an evil person. And I'm not going to get into heaven. Who wants 100 if you don't get into heaven? And what's more, I'm filthy and I stink. And it's a gradual process, all at a subconscious level. And so what happens over a period of 5 times, they debase themselves and they just want to get cleansed of this notion that they're evil, they're not going to get into heaven, they won't be happy. They haven't worked hard for it, so they don't deserve it. And they're filthy and they stink, and the only solution is to get rid of the money. It's all subconscious. It happens all over the world, every Western nation. So what I do when I have these 2-day events is I literally get people to spend half an hour writing down every thought about money they can remember having had as a kid. And I won't get you to do that now for half an hour because we will fall asleep. But can you think of any? Can anyone share one maybe that I haven't said? Does anything come to mind? Because I've got about 30 or 40 that I remember if I think hard enough. Like I came up with that one just now, I've forgotten it already.
Penny saved is a penny earned.
Yeah, a penny saved is a penny earned. In other words, it's more important to save a penny than to earn a penny. And if you live by that philosophy of a penny saved is a penny earned, then you won't go looking for a building where there's 30 million profit in it, just for finding a tenant. It inhibits you from doing that. Any other ones? We don't have the money. Right. We can't afford it. Right. So after getting a collation of all these ideas, and every time someone mentions one, like we can't afford it, others in the audience will say, yeah, that's me too. Or, we don't have the money. Yeah, that was me too. And they get these long things. And then I say to them, all right, now I want you to do something that's really uncomfortable. I want you to come up with a more empowering belief, something that if you said it over and over in your mind, it might take hold in your mind, just as all these negative beliefs have taken hold. And here's the beauty of it, guys. You don't even need to believe it. So I'll give you an example. There was a woman, we did the event in Earl's Court in London, and there was a woman there, I remember her name, it was Margaret, and she had a limiting belief that was easy come, easy go. And she had a good job, like she was making £200,000 a year or something, but she never had money. It came and it went. Easy come, easy go. And it's my contention, I'm sharing this with you, it's specifically because we have these beliefs that we have our bad money habits. That woman stayed poor because she had this belief, easy come, easy go. So even if she made $300,000, well, remember, it's easy come, easy go. So the $300,000 going to go, and she bought all the stuff she loved having, but she was eternally poor. So I then challenge everyone to spend another half hour coming up with more empowering ideas. And I'll invite you to do the same, but in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest some. And then I'll reveal what Margaret's eventually was. But some of the ones I suggest to people that they might want to have, for instance, is my poverty helps no one, but my wealth can help a lot of people, right? If you're poor and you're clean and you're going to get into heaven and, all those good holes, but you've got no money, you can't help anyone. Whereas if you're rapaciously wealthy, because you've worked hard to do things, you're in a position to help a lot of people. And that might help you get into heaven. Well, I shouldn't say that, but you know what I mean? That's actually a good thing. So my poverty helps no one, my wealth can help a lot of people. Or the Reverend Ike said, I am a magnet for money. Now, that's pretty cool. Because if you say that over and over, and I mean it over and over, even if you don't believe it, I'm not a magnet. I don't see magnet go sticking onto I'm not a magnet for money. But if you say it over and over, you will become figuratively a magnet for money. In fact, I am a magnet for money. It comes to me in all shapes and forms and deals and business propositions. And that's all the energy you put out there. But you've got to believe it first. And I'm not the first to come up with this. I'm not trying to claim ownership of these concepts. But as a man thinketh, if you remember that book, it's the thoughts you have become your reality. And there are these 200 books I read all came to the same conclusion. When you come up with a new, more empowering belief that you'd like to think you could believe at some stage in the future, because remember, you don't have to believe it now yet. I want you to say it just for 1 month. Every evening before you go to bed and every morning when you get up. Now, there are a few rules about saying this. You can't say it aloud in your head. You've got to vocalize it. That's the first thing. Because then it's not only your brain thinking it, but you hear yourself saying it. Secondly, you can't say it to no one. And no, you can't look in a mirror and say it to yourself. You have to say it to another human being. Shannon, in your case, it's easy. You can do it to each other. Jason, you've got a wife at home. You can say it to her. In fact, you've both got Korean wives, and it's a rare thing to ever say. But for those of you on your own, it doesn't matter. Call someone on the phone. A sister, a cousin, a friend, the grocer, it doesn't matter. You need to have someone hear it, because when you know someone else is listening to it, it becomes more powerful to you. And just like we took on those horrid beliefs like money can't buy you happiness and money's the root of all evil, it's not. Money's just a tool. It can do evil and it can do good. It's how you choose to deploy it, right? So just as those bad sayings took root in your mind, and that's, I think, why most people don't think they can earn good money. They don't think they'll ever have a nice car. They don't think they'll ever buy a building. They don't think they'll amount to everything because, well, it's better to give than to receive. So I've been a giver all my life. That's why I'm poor. Basically, all these limiting beliefs are justifications for why we're poor instead of reasons for why we may be rich. So if you say that every night and every morning for 30 days, something amazing is going to happen. If you're interested, I'll give you a second thing you can do that will change your financial future forever. So we'll get on to that. But back to Margaret, Earl's Court. Her limiting belief was easy come, easy go. And every now and then, every hour or so, we'd say, Margaret, have you come up with a better empowering belief? And she'd try something. And it was such that the whole audience, there were about 200, they cringed and said no. And it was 4 p.m. on Sunday, the second and last day, that she said, I think I've got it. I think I've got it. I said, all right, Margaret, what was the original one? And she said, easy come, easy go. I said, okay, and what do you think your new empowering belief might be? She said, how about easy come, easy grow? And just changing that one word and that becoming her subconscious thought, can you see the powerful impact of the difference of, instead of thinking, well, it might come to me easily, but it goes out the door just as fast, to comes to me easily and I can make it grow. What does that mean? We can invest it. We can do things with it. We can spend 28 million and turn it into 60 million overnight. Is it overnight, guys? Figuratively, it's not quite overnight. But it might take 2 years, but it could take 2 weeks. It just takes a tenant, remember? That's why I get excited. That's why I've always said from day one, even the first words you heard me say on stage, is the reason I like commercial real estate is specifically I can buy a vacant or semi-vacant building at a price reflecting the fact that it's not fully let. And by the time I get a tenant there, boom, the value goes up. That's how I've made most of my money in real estate. Not by buying something with a 4.8% yield and waiting 3 generations for it to go up in value. No, just get that jump on day one, and we're getting close. So the first thought is having this more empowering belief. And you know, if we were here on a 2-day event, I would force you all, no matter where you're at, to write down your old beliefs and your new beliefs, and then pick one that you want to use for the next 30 days and do it over and over. Whether or not you do it, it's up to you, but to the extent that you do that, you will benefit from it. I know that because, well, here's the reason how I know that. When I started incorporating these teachings into my real estate, my success rate went from under 4% to over 80%. If that's not evidence that this stuff works, I don't know what is.